CP the Tool Addict. Woo! Today's video, swivel sockets. Everything and every swivel socket out there, every style, even the chrome ones. I ain't forgetting these. They're in here. We're going to talk about, give you all the information from my years of experience and what I like to use and why. Talk about the evolution. Talk about swivel sockets, of how they changed. They've tried to come up and gone back, and just everything. The technology in swivel sockets. Probably not a lot of history, but more along the lines of technology. I was involved with a lot of swivel socket technology when I was a tool dealer, so stick around. This is going to be a good video. You're going to want to hear about this one. Come on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I've had a ton of questions about swivel sockets throughout the 4 years that I've been on YouTube, okay? Some good, some bad, you know, of course, it's always this and that. So we're going to talk about some different styles of swivel sockets starting off. First of all, your main styles of swivel sockets you're going to see generally are going to be pinless, and this is a fluted. See how it has the flutes in there. A standard pinless, which is going to be like this, usually a four-piece, four type. This was an octagon, hexagon type style. This is a koken. And then you have a collared pin, one like so, or like these. These are a pretty standard style for you're going to see on a lot of different sockets. And then you have some thinner collars. These are SKs. I do have some, I may have a Sunnex, I think, up here somewhere. I'm not sure. But this is basically the ADV. We're going to use this as an example. And I have 1/4-inch ones in impact, so on and so forth. So starting off, everybody always asks me what's the best to get. Well, I always say, if you're a professional in using swivel sockets, hands down, the only way to go for swivel sockets is absolutely getting these fixed swivel sockets. Now, this is a snap-on. I have Mac and Cornwell are my go-tos, really. My Mac and my Cornwells. These are an older design. You can't get these. These are all pinned. They're all pretty much the same now. This is a Cornwell, and this one still has an exposed pin. But since the technology has changed on a lot of these, they have welded in the pins. They've welded in the pinholes on these styles of sockets for a reason. One is eliminate injury. This pin is meant to break with stress on this and not come flying out of the socket. Because over the years, as being a tool truck dealer, I can tell you there was multiple injuries given from swivel sockets. These are probably, if I have to be really honest, these are probably one of the most injured. These are probably one of the most tools that cause injury in all the tools, because a lot of guys use these for taking out transmission bolts on long extensions. And I've had one of these whipping down a transmission tunnel, taking out some transmission bolts. And it ain't fun when this part of the socket comes flying apart. And the reason why that was is because of these designs right here. And if you are a Mac dealer and you've been around long enough, you should know that this pinless design was an epic fail for Mac tools. I haven't warrantied these out because I haven't broken these yet, but this design is actually pretty terrible, to be honest with you. The clip, it's just got a little clip that holds it in there. And when you start putting a lot of pressure and binding on this, they start to get loosened up. Now there's a spring detent, there's a spring underneath there, as you can see inside of there. And that's what gives your socket tension. You see there, I can push down on it and it kind of gives it some, spring. And that's what keeps it kind of, so you can kind of lock it in there. But once they start getting loose, they start getting dangerous, because then you start letting this fall apart. And then that spring can kind of move, or that ring, that snap ring inside there can kind of start getting loose. And then boom, catastrophic failure. Not a good deal. So that's why they went back to this design where they've got a welded in, or a pin that's welded in. Now, once again, this is a older socket, but this is, I'm showing you where the pin was on this older socket. Obviously, you can see this is held up for a while. This is a pretty traditional design. There's no ring on this, so that gives you more access in a tighter area. Versus something like this, which you're going to find on a lot of economic sockets. And I can't stress to you enough how bad I hate these things. They cause burrs. They get, they cause burrs, so when you're taking something off, you go to stick your hand up there, and you didn't realize it had a burr on it. Next thing you know, you get a chunk of metal in your hand. Not only that, you can look at the actual width of this. I mean, it's all adapter at the end, and there's your socket. looking straight down. There's a lot of girth to that versus a socket that doesn't. I mean, this is a 19. Let me see if I can get. That's a 14 mil. So let's get a 14 mil to be politically correct. See if I grabbed it. First shot. Look at that. Know your stuff. Know your equipment. Here's a 14 mil that's not pin, that doesn't have the collar on it. And if you look down this thing, you know, you can see that there's actually not as much girth around the socket. And that is a huge, huge deal that comes into play when you're trying to get into tighter areas. I can't even stress that. I mean, look at the snap-ons, the same thing. You're trying to keep the girth of the socket down in size-wise. Here's a Mac, and this is a 19 millimeter. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of girth on the socket head end, which is not a big deal because you're dealing with a cap. You're dealing with the bolt that's or the nut or bolt that's going to be bigger. So that's nice. That's completely nice. Why would professional tool trucks do this if this was inherently wrong or bad? This is an SK that I bought. I don't use these that much, but once again, these are kind of the traditional, like you're going to find these on your Sunnex and gray pneumatics. And they do a fine job. Not going to lie to you. I use 1/4 inch ADV ones, and I really like these. I have a full set of deep and shallow in the ADVs and swivels, and I love them. I'm not going to lie to you. They haven't been a big problem. They kept them a lot tighter around the ring, and what it does is it captures that pin in there and keeps the pin from dislodging and causing a catastrophic failure. Hopefully you're understanding all this. Now, a lot of people say, well, CP, why couldn't I just buy an adapter? Well, you certainly can, but look what you're going to get sometimes if you're not paying attention to adapters. This is a Mac adapter, 1/4 inch adapter, and a ADV or a SUNEX variation version, if I can get these in my hand, and look at the difference of height. Now, you also got to keep in mind, there's a difference in chrome heights and impact heights. There's a little bit of difference. So when you put that chrome socket or that impact socket on there, there's going to be a substantial difference. And that's why some of the tool truck ones have shorter ones. Now, that being said, is that going to be the same as a standard swivel socket like that? Absolutely not. Looking at a normal 10 millimeter swivel socket versus one of these with an adapter, you are getting a tremendous clearance or height difference. So if you're trying to get into a tighter access, it's going to be a huge deal. Now, the one thing I will say, fixed proprietary sockets like these, swivel sockets, are extremely expensive. You can buy some chrome ones even, but they're still expensive too. They do the job, but they also carry a lot of issues like binding because they get set. You can get them to extreme angle. They tend to be a little bit of a pain, and then you put O-rings on them to try to shore them up to keep them from less wobbly, from getting floppy. There is a struggle. Swivel sockets are not the perfect end-all be-all. I will tell you that. There's a lot of controversy over some things about swivel sockets, but I will tell you, if you are a professional, definitely want to go with something that's got a welded pin in here. Whether it be Snap-on, Mac, Cornwell, Matco. Actually, Matco is really not my favorite, and I'll show you why. This fluted design is all Matco has left, unless you get the ADV styles, which I got to say, the ADV styles are very similar to SUNEX, so you might want to save yourself some money and get the SUNEX ones. But the ADV pinless sockets tend to be, they get really, and they hang up. I don't really like these. These flutes, for some reason, start galling in here, and then they get really choppy. You can kind of hear it, hear that clicking. It's not a smooth action after you use them. Once again, I bought this adapter to test to see, instead of buying a full set of swivel sockets too, it might behoove you to just test with an adapter to see what you like too, honestly. That's one of those things. But I will say the majority of your sockets that you're going to get now that are going to be, and I know Mac, Cornwell, and Snap-on, all three are pinned when you buy these. Snap-on, however, is laser welding the pin in. And the reason they do that is because they want this pin to break and capture inside of there so it doesn't dislodge the socket from the top of the socket. It is an extremely dangerous thing once these two pieces separate. They cause some major things happening. Like I mean, you got to think, this thing's whipping around at 2,300 RPM off your impact. The last thing you want to do is, you ever try to catch a pinball right after it's been shot? That's basically what this is. You get a pinball socket. That's what we used to call them when they come loose from the top. I don't notice any of these sockets actually being, a lot of people try to think that these rings, the captured rings, actually help it, and that's not true. The reason why this technology was changed to this is because when the pin breaks, usually, not always, but usually the pin breaks and the socket lodges itself in there, and it only breaks on one side, because usually you're extruding force on whatever direction you're going, that's where it's going to break the pin. And I don't know if you can see any wear inside of this one. There's going to be a little bit of wear on the bar, but this technology has been changed over and over again. When I was on the tool truck, when I was a Mac dealer, I can tell you I was warrantying these things out like every other week. I mean, it was bad because of just the catastrophic failures. And I heard stories about guys saying, yeah, one of these things came loose when I was taking a transmission out, shot down the tunnel, and boom, hit me right between the eyes. You don't want to do that. So my favorite sockets, however, though, have been these Cornwells. I do use the deep some, but I will tell you, the majority of the sockets that I use are shallow, okay? And once again, if you are always trying to get into tight access places, it's who of you. Now, keep in mind, not only these shallows come in different sizes, yes, they do. Mac and Snap-on have different size of shallows. These heads can be, this is like an extra shallow, and Mac is usually like that. They basically become an extra shallow. Snap-on, you have to buy the extra shallows. Their shallows are actually a little bit deeper than these. So that's why I've always been a fan of Macs, because their standard shallows are a little bit shorter. I mean, that's something the Mac that has always done, though. I mean, look at their chrome socket. It's a shorter socket as well. So I hope I'm not missing anything. I mean, and let me just show you another deal right here. If you're using a 3/8 adapter, it's really the same situation. You know, you're getting an adapter with this giant socket, and look at the height difference between a 3/8 shallow. Now, keep in mind, they're not the same size, but the reference is really the same. I mean, that is a massive difference in height there. So if you're trying to get, you're in there for clearance issues, that's why the extensions. Not only that, when you're using a impact with one of these extensions, it is extremely sketchy. I'm not gonna lie to you. Once again, 2,300 RPM, and this thing comes popping off, you know, because they don't always fit on there. Now, you can get these in a pinned version. You can get these sockets with a pin instead of a ball detent, which then keeps it from flying off. And there was a lot of guys that use those. They just get a pinned adapter and run them in them, and those work too. Don't get me wrong. Their adapters work, you know, the adapters work, and they've been using them for years. But, you know, and if you are trying to save a buck and you're trying to get on a budget, maybe look at buying a pin swivel. You know, you can buy them in a 1/4 and a 3/8 and a 1/2 inch and turn your shallow sockets or extra shallow sockets. Once again, I do have an extra shallow socket right here. You can buy something like these Nano sockets on a 3/8, and let's just look at that. Not quite as bad, still not quite as shallow, but you know, you could run a Nano socket and kind of get almost the same scenario. Save yourself a little bit of space. I understand that these things are extremely expensive, guys, and it took me a long time to gather up all the swivels that I need. And I'm not telling you which ones to buy or what you can or cannot buy. Believe you me, it's all up to you at the end of the day. I don't care what brand you buy. I can't express that enough. I know a lot of people think that I'm brand loyal to Snap-on or whatever, but honestly, my favorite swivel sockets are Mac and Cornwell. And I like the Mac one or the Cornwell ones because of their finish. They have like a blued finish. And I have heard guys say they crack, but I've had Mac, Snap-on cracks. These things are usually a mechanic's Bible. These are like, you know, these are the tools right here that guys use all the time. I mean, this socket's taken off a lot of stuff. 18 millimeter and 22. What we got here? 21. 18 and 21, use them all the time in a 1/2 inch variation. You know, I used my swivel all the time. Used to be all you used to have was these. So, lot going over on this video. Oh, I didn't even show the Koken double swivels. You know, they do have a little bit of different design, but I still am skeptic. I don't put a lot of torque on these because they are pinless. You know, that's something that I keep in mind, but that gives me a 60-degree angle too. So usually if I'm trying to get into something like this, I'm using a hand ratchet and sneaking around somewhere to get into it. These come in super handy. I hope if there's anything that I missed or you have any other questions, leave it down in the comment box. Hopefully I went over everything. There's a lot of information. I know I will tell you I really can't tell you enough to stay away from these style sockets. I don't like these. A lot of times they come with an aluminum ring, which is even worse. Gear wrench is like one of the terriblest ones. I owned a set of gear wrench, destroyed them. I actually showed them on a video one time. And if you're going to buy swivels, I highly recommend just buying the swivels from the tool truck, staying on the higher side of things. But if you're on a budget and you need some impact swivels, you know, definitely look at Sunnex or Pneumatic, especially if you're not using them all the time. They'll do the job probably pretty well for you. And warranty is definitely key for something like this because these are a high warranted item. I will tell you that. But if you can and you want to get a set of good swivel sockets, definitely the only ones out there to get are either Max, Snap-on, or Cornwell, in my opinion. The Matcos, like I said, I'm really not a big fan of the flutes unless you get the ADVs. So, anyways, guys, that's all I got for you. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell. Remember, keep your hands dirty and your money clean. Thanks for watching.